What's up, everybody? Welcome to the newest episode of Demo Day, the podcast for entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, where we demystify the culture of joining one of the top accelerator, incubator, or VC programs from around the world. I'm your host, Sean Goldbatten, CEO of Coefficient Labs, and today we'll be interviewing Anthony Kelani, managing partner at Quake Capital. As managing partner of Quake's Los Angeles office, Anthony works closely with Quake's accelerator founders to mentor and guide them through their earliest stages of growth. Quake makes seed-level investments in new and early-stage ventures across a wide range of industries, including e-commerce, SaaS, fintech, and others. No matter which part of the journey you're on, Anthony has been there. He'll also take us through how to keep the right mindset and recognize opportunities when you least expect them, and the value of always hearing people out. Without further ado, let's get into Demo Day. Anthony, thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Really appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is dope. This is really cool.
Awesome, man. So Demo Day is a podcast for founders that are thinking about joining a program, whether it's an accelerator or an incubator, or even just learning more about the venture community. And so really, this is a podcast to learn more about your life, learn more about, why you're in the startup community, and really what Quake stands for and what you guys are hoping to do, in this LA and SF ecosystem.
Cool.
So before we dive into Quake, I think it's always awesome to get to know the VC and learn a little bit more about yourself. And can you talk to us about, early life here? What was it like for you growing up? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Bay Area. That's where I'm originally from. Born in Oakland, California. Raised on the East Bay. Spent most of my time in Oakland and Berkeley area. Yeah.
Is Oakland when you were growing up part of the Silicon Valley ecosystem, or was it I know that right now tech is spread so much in the Bay Area. Right. What was it like for you back then?
A lot of the tech was it wasn't a lot in Oakland and the East Bay. It was mostly in Silicon Valley area, Palo Alto area. It was really concentrated there. So. But I got exposed to technology early. My father's actually in IT. My father's from Nigeria, actually. He's an immigrant, and he was in IT. He worked for the University of California system, and he would always bring computers home. And I was just always around computers and computer science books. He went to college in the Bay Area, and that's where my parents met. And
what did you do for fun as a kid? Were you like into sports, or have you always been into technology?
I was pretty well-rounded. My parents involved me in a lot of different things. I played basketball and tennis. I played music for a long time. I played trumpet and piano. I played trumpet jazz for a long time. By the time I was in college, I was actually a lead trumpet in the Trojan Marching Band, when I came down here to LA. So.
Now, so many VCs that we talk to come from either, a business background, a finance background, a banking background. But I think what's so unique about you is that you have such a heavy engineering background. When did you first find or pick up a computer, and when did you first get kind of into the idea of technology and coding?
I probably started coding when I was super early. It was probably 10 or 11 years old. Like I said, my father brought home computers all the time. I used to kind of open them and break them and figure out how they worked and the parts and stuff. And then I graduated to one of my hobbies was actually building PCs. So they used to have this computer show that would switch between Oakland and San Francisco every other week. And I used to work back then too. So in middle school and high school, I actually landed a job at a nonprofit web design firm and made money there and just bought one of my hobbies was building computers, and so I would always go to those computer shows and get the latest parts. I was also a gamer, so a big PC gamer, so I always soup up my machine with the latest video card and
what was CPU the game of the day? What was the game of the day back then? What were you?
Counter-Strike.
Counter-Strike, yes.
Yeah.
Were you in a clan, or did you put together a little group of friends, or were you a solo man?
Just me and my best friend used to just go in and just go in on folks. We didn't have a clan or anything like that.
So let me ask you though.
my younger brother was more so in that type of.
Were you because I think Counter-Strike for me was the first time I'd ever come across like the concept of hacking or adding these sort of like ability to do like speed hacks and all of that.
Right.
Were you ever able to toy around in that world, or were you mostly just in it for the love of the game?
I was always interested in that stuff. I mean, I've tried it, but like, you know, I was a legit gamer. I didn't cheat and stuff like that. But we could always tell when people were cheating.
Right? Like you get stuck on like the top of the world or whatever.
Or somebody's halfway into the ground, like floor or something. You could always tell.
That's right.
First person shooters were my thing, and you know, that was, you know.
Did you always know that you wanted to go to USC for engineering, or how did you decide to kind of go down that pathway?
So, you know, I didn't know that I wanted to go to USC. Like USC was I know it had a really good engineering school. I think my top two was like, you know, USC and Georgia Tech. I got into both, but I decided to go to USC because it was, you know, still in California, but, you know, really good school and good balance of like sports and engineering and just, you know, good balance. I had, you know, imagine I would go to Stanford or something like that too, but, you know, didn't get in there. But I got into USC, and I'm glad I made that choice actually, because I was able to play music and also do like engineering, which top two things I love to do. So.
Which I think is kind of interesting about just the LA versus SF ecosystem. So I'm curious, like, what's your point of view? What is LA's culture when it comes to the startup scene versus, you know, San Francisco? And, you know, without harshly calling, you know, anyone out, but what's the general philosophy for people that maybe are from the Midwest or the East Coast? What's kind of the two different styles that you see?
Like the Bay Area definitely is like way further along, and their ecosystem is way more developed. You know, you have all these ranges of VCs, all this money up there, very tech focused. You get a lot of engineers, like really techie companies. Down here, I noticed that just the roots are different. You know, defense and biotech and aerospace are like kind of the roots down here. A lot of the VCs I've just known and met are like operators of companies, not really like super techie. Up in the Bay Area, you get a lot of investors that are like, you know, previous engineers and stuff. So those are kind of the biggest differences. But like LA just really has its own style. And, you know, I actually grew up like my adult life here because I came to college here and I stayed here in LA, and I grew up with the tech ecosystem here. And it's been great how it's been growing. It has its own style. And I think there's a big advantage here just because of all the different industries like entertainment and, like I said, biotech. You know, we have, I mean, people don't know, like we have every single industry here. Some people think that like New York is just for financial, but we have the financial industry here too. And manufacturing is like huge here. So it's a huge opportunity here in LA. And I love it.
Did you surround yourself in college with friends that were entrepreneurial, or when did you start your first business? When did that even become part of your thought process?
Yeah, neither one of my parents were like, you know, business owners, so I didn't grow up around that. But like, I just naturally, I kind of had like, I've always been a schemer. Like I've always like, you know, tried to figure out ways to make money, and it just was natural kind of to me. But I didn't know how to build businesses until later down the line.
What were some of the fun ways when you were a kid you used to make money or like figure out your way around? Because I've got a great story for you.
I think the one that stands out the most, I don't even remember exactly how this happened, but like, I remember some random person had emailed me about like creating they had like a baseball, like a amateur baseball team, and needed something like a little piece of software to track their stats and stuff.
Okay.
So and he wanted to pay me and stuff, but like, my parents were like, "Who is this dude?" Like, so like I didn't give him my information, but I actually ended up building a tool for him to track like their team stats and stuff like that, and that was awesome. Pretty cool. That's one of the first things I remember that I did. Like, you know,
wow.
Like
so I have no
product.
I have no tech, early tech to bring to the table. But when I was in third grade, my deal was I would go to the card stores and buy a Pokemon decks. And I would take the shiny cards out of the decks and then put them back into like this custom laminated folder. And so I was basically the guy on campus that would help people complete their, you know, shiny cards with Pokemon sets. And so
nice.
That's really awesome.
I mean, I've always been the guy in my family that just was the tech guy. And every time somebody's computer broke or whatever, like I was the guy. And then it spread to like friends and family, like friends of family and stuff. And then I guess, you know, it turned into like me getting paid to fix people's computers and all that stuff. So that's kind of later down the line. But
when did you decide to change your hobby for fixing computers and just technology and like helping out the people around you and start to say like I can actually make a living from this and I can do something with the skill?
Well, like both of my parents are super smart. Like my mom is really good at science and math. Like she's pretty good at everything. She literally watches Jeopardy and knows all the answers to everything. So, and then my father's IT, computer guy. But like I guess me growing up, like education was super important. So I was always ahead in math and science, always like grades ahead. So that was just a great entryway for me to go into engineering school. And my first real, like, I guess, try or like glimpse into really entrepreneurship was like kind of during my first job out of college. I was in the defense industry for 6 years, and I was building technology for the military and government.
This is through Northrop Grumman.
Northrop Grumman, yeah, and I was there for 6 years. But the last 3 years I was there, it was actually running my own project that I actually thought of, and I actually got funding from Northrop Grumman and the government to do it. And that's when I realized, I'm like, if I could come up with ideas and that solve problems and I'll get funding for it, like that was like amazing to me. That's my first kind of like glimpse into like, dang, okay, I need to take this further. And so I got a really good opportunity to be head of engineering at a venture studio here in LA. And that's really when I started to learn how to build companies, because during that time, we used the book Lean Startup, and we kind of followed that a lot, and we, validated ideas and did the iterative process, and got funding and all that stuff. So that's really, really what I got in and started really learning about how to build startups.
I want to talk about the venture fund, but I think this is like a really unique opportunity for people listening that maybe right now are currently at a bigger corporation or a bigger company, and they've been thinking about starting their business, but I think that they're being an entrepreneur can certainly be a lonely game. So my question to you is, what advice do you have for that person sitting at their desk that is really, really entrepreneurial, but maybe they don't want to go on their own? What advice do you have for them to maneuver and navigate their way through a more corporate system?
So you mean like going into maybe possibly leaving and going into a startup, or like
I would
a startup, or just
to how do you be entrepreneurial within a big organization?
Oh, right. So big organizations, it's really hard for them to really innovate. For me, I found innovation within Northrop Grumman because I did projects outside of work. I was a developer there, but I was doing other development work outside. So I was like one of the first people to try out the Android and iPhone SDKs and learn how to do mobile apps early on, like when the first phones came out. So I just tinkered around a lot with that stuff. And because I did that, I kind of thought about the problems just around me in my everyday life in terms of like work. And I identified some problems there and paired that with kind of my tinkering around outside of work, and proposed that problem and solution to the actual my actual boss, and he was like, "Wow, this is like really what the future is." And from there, it was just it was great.
I think what's really interesting about what you said is it applies to both the scenario of being entrepreneurial in a big company or just being a startup, which is solving problems. I think so many startups go in saying like, I've got this idea, I've got this thing, I've got this opportunity, but they're not really addressing, here's this problem. Like there's this person that has this problem, and if you're working at that big company, that person can be your boss, that person can be your manager. But focusing on problems is the fastest way for you to stand out from the crowd. And bring real solutions. So
Absolutely.
Jumping forward now, you're in this venture studio, and the lean startup. That's really awesome too. That was such an important part. That Co-Efficient Labs is really rooted in that same methodology of. I worked for a company that ran on the lean startup for their product and thought, oh, what if we iterate around advertising and around data science and around experiments?
Yeah.
when you were at this venture fund, how did you start to transition yourself into, sort of from an employee into this, concept around you're now investing in companies or you're helping companies see the future? What was it like for you to move from, that mindset into someone that's empowering other startups?
It was great. I mean, it was a great opportunity, and I'm fortunate to have been part of that. It was very fulfilling to at the end of the day just to be able to work on problems and build things constantly and fail and learn from that and get back up again. The transition wasn't too hard because, like I said, at Northrop Grumman, I started that path down, doing kind of innovation within the corporation, and it was just like a real natural, great transition to going into startup. I mean, I took less pay, but it was just more. It was more upside in terms of learning more and having more opportunity to be a part owner in a company and ideas that I created and built from the ground up. So
was it at your your first venture fund that you started your business ShowKit, or was it after?
It was around that time. So we built several companies within the venture studio that, some, a lot of them crashed and burned, and a few of them did well and spun off into their own companies, and a few got acquired actually early on. And then ShowKit came about after that, after the venture studio stuff. They were actually my first investors. And the technology kind of came out of some of the work that I was working on at the venture studio as well. So, had this great technology that I built with a few engineers and spun off into our own company. We had this technology, but it wasn't actually the final product that we ended up doing for ShowKit. ShowKit ended up being very focused on real-time customer support. So we built this technology basically to do real-time streaming between mobile devices, so you can share your screen with another mobile device, or even a desktop computer, which had never been done before. And so we had this great technology. We were like, we're going to put it out there. Developers could use it to do whatever they want with it. And then we started to find out everybody has so many different use cases for it, and no one really felt special. So it was just kind of hard to sell it or get a business model around it. But then we started to realize there was a group of folks that were really using it for trying to solve problems remotely inside their apps. And so that's where we started to hone in on that group of people, and we were like, okay. And we listened to our customers really closely. We actually had an open chat room where they came in, all the developers came in, and just we spoke directly to them.
I've got a question for you about customer development. So we had a founder on a couple episodes ago from a company called Tapcart, and we were talking about customer development, and he said something so interesting, which is I think especially if you're on the lean startup mentality, I think that it's so obvious the benefits of getting customer development and customer feedback. But one of the benefits that he talked about that I didn't consider was when he's actually pitching his startup to venture capitalists, that when you use customer development as part of your narrative and selling to a VC, that he was able to say, we've interviewed thousands of our customers, and the VCs are thinking, oh, that's the sort of founder. Do you think that if a founder comes to you with that sort of customer development, they show that go-getter mentality, is that something that you actually weigh into when you're deciding on a company?
Absolutely. I advise people that are pre-revenue to show that as traction. That's a big key part of showing traction, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't have revenue, or I'm not paying customers, and how do I show traction? Show traction in that you can show traction in a couple of ways. You can show traction that we thought of this idea in March. We got down and got an MVP together in a month. We launched MVP. We talked to customers. We opened up the beta and launched in 3 months, and we have this many people using the app. Just show the investor that you're moving forward.
That narrative
that you're moving forward fast. And if you're fundraising, you're fundraising for this amount of time, but you're heads down. Other than that, the week or whatever that you're meeting investors, you're heads down, moving forward with your team, and you're not wasting time. So speaking to customers and having a good narrative around what you've learned and what has failed is a really good sign to investors that you know what you're doing.
So, clearly right now you're not at ShowKit. You've since moved on. So what ended up happening with that first major company and what were the takeaways from it?
We ran the company for a few years. We actually ended up getting a really big customer in India. So I took several trips to India to integrate with their customer support center. Actually, the guy that we connected with there was actually used to do the head of customer support for Apple, actually. And
Okay.
he saw us pitch. We did TechCrunch Disrupt in 2014, I believe. And we were finalists there. And he saw our pitch there. And then he went to that company in India and was head of their customer support, worked closely with them, integrated with them. And they actually, after a year or so, they ended up just acquiring our technology.
Wow.
And, and then I took some time off, and that's the beginning of my journey of giving back now to the ecosystem and working closely with founders.
Now, did you join Microsoft was this after your kind of time where you had some time to relax? Was this your first go back into the kind of working world and, as you're saying, giving back to startups?
Yeah, so I took some time off and was working with several companies in the LA ecosystem. I was interim CTO for a few companies, just advising and doing just a lot of work closely with founders and CEOs, especially ones that weren't technical. The Microsoft thing came around. Microsoft actually reached out to me because they kind of did their research on me and saw what I was doing in the ecosystem. They had a startup platform that was nationwide, actually worldwide, and they didn't have any presence in LA and wanted to get in this ecosystem. And they knew I was pretty deep in there, and I was already working with founders. So, they reached out. I kind of ignored them a few times at first
Just
because I didn't want to
Microsoft?
work for a big company. Mm-hmm. I got approached by Apple also in the meantime, and like Google or whatever. But I didn't really want to work for a big company. But this unique opportunity, like I actually answered the phone and they explained the opportunity. And I was like, wow, this is like, Microsoft would back me in stuff that I'm already doing. I'm able to help founders, but also like work on technical stuff too. And that was it was just a natural transition. I was already hooked into their partners here in LA, Mucker Lab, Amplify, Techstars. I already knew those guys. And
So you've worked for Northrop Grumman, you've worked for Microsoft, you've had the chance, if you wanted to work for companies like Apple and Google. Mm-hmm. How did Quake nab you? How did we land where we currently are right now? And when did you decide that being a venture capitalist or helping startups at bigger scale was something that you wanted to be in your future?
I've always worked alongside accelerators and VCs, and I've always been kind of on the side of the table of the founder. And I've just always been like interested in venture capital and being an investor because I feel like I have a different lens around just problems and like the way I look at companies and the types of companies I see. I also branch out outside of the really popular ecosystems. Like I spend a lot of time in South LA, like finding entrepreneurs and things which is an overlooked community, but which has brilliant people. I was early on, like looking at Vector 90, which is a co-working space in South LA. It was actually funded by Nipsey Hussle and founded by his partner David Gross. And so that just blew my mind, like just having starting that ecosystem in that area. It's just, it was great. But I just had a unique lens, and I actually got the really great opportunity to join a cohort of the 500 Startups VC bootcamp they did with UC Berkeley Law.
Okay.
And so I applied for that. I didn't know if I was get it. They wanted kind of people that had been investors previously, but I actually ended up getting in the cohort and actually getting a scholarship to it. And so I spent a week in that boot camp and learned everything about venture finance and law and all that. So it was really, really intense course. And I told myself after that course, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to go into VC. And that was a year ago. And so,
that's what we're going. I want to spend another minute or so talking about some of the more inner city startups, some of the startups that maybe have different sort of adversities and obstacles. I think there's so many people and startup founders that are listening to you right now. Can we talk more about Give it to them real. What do you do when the world feels like it's up against you? You know, what are some tactical steps, or how have you been able to separate yourself? I think that sometimes it's really easy to just say, oh, we're in this really small community or in this small niche. But I think someone like yourself can help bring a different perspective and maybe even, light a little bit of a fire. What do you have to say to the founders that are currently, in that environment? And if anything at all, what advice do you have?
I would say, like even me, like I had, I've been coding since I was 10. I had all this stuff, this great experience behind me. When I became an entrepreneur, it still was hard for me to raise funding. It's just the way it is, but I didn't let it stop me. I'm passionate about technology. There was no way I could stop doing it. If I did, why would, it would be miserable, right? You just have to keep going and not give up. I would say for those folks that want to get into the startup ecosystem or tech ecosystem and just haven't had that exposure, just reach out, just be present at it. Try to find the events and just network. And if you have an idea, don't be afraid to share that idea. A lot of people will get afraid and say oh shit, get people to sign an NDA. Don't do that. Just get out there, share your idea. That's also how you will find other people that have your same passion and might join you as a co-founder, especially technical people. Like if you sell them on the vision and the problem, technical people might even leave their good job to join you because they believe in it so much.
Definitely. And I know, you and I continue to kind of bump into each other at some of these events, but most of them are in LA, in downtown. Mm-hmm. It's not all, in Santa Monica or in Venice. I really, really think that it's so easy to live in your apartment, in your own little box, in your own little bubble, and think that either you've got it all figured out or you don't have the help or the support. But when you go to some of these events, whether it's at Backstage or you're going to your event at Quake, or you realize that wow, there are programs where everyone's in that together. They're all going through the same thing. So I want to ask you, if you're talking to a student right now, you're talking to a founder, you're talking to someone that is currently thinking about becoming a VC, what words of wisdom do you have, or even different, what words of caution do you have? Because you've sort of now been on both sides of the coin. You've done your advising and mentoring, but you've also been the one operating. What sort of advice or words of wisdom do you have?
I'm pretty new to VC now. I've been at Quake for 2 months now. And I'm still learning more, but I would say for those folks that want to get into VC and they just don't have the experience yet or anything, get out there and meet startup founders and create your own portfolio. You don't need to be under a fund to do this type of work. Go meet founders, the ones that really that really intrigue you or you're interested in. Help them out, just be part of what they're doing. Create your own little portfolio of companies, and then go out there, and when you see VCs or whatever, you have this deal flow, because VCs are always looking for deal flow, good companies, and introduce them to VCs, other VCs or whatever.
That's a great idea.
That's a good way to kind of get in and get rapport with other VCs, and you might not be trying to get a job at the time, or maybe you are, but it's just a good way to get a good rapport with other investors. Create your own portfolio and then talk to investors.
Create your own portfolio. That's such great advice. Mm-hmm. So Quake is a Los Angeles accelerator program here. You guys just launched your spring accelerator in March. 15 new startups, and talk to us a little bit more about Quake. When you're kind of out for drinks or out for dinner with some colleagues, when you're talking about Quake, how do you describe the experience? What's it like to go into the Quake program?
So we're an early stage fund and accelerator. Our accelerator program is 12 weeks long. We invest in 15 companies, and we do the accelerator twice a year. So we're in week 6 right now of our current accelerator. And we actually just opened applications for the next cohort, and which should be starting in September timeframe. We are industry agnostic, so we don't, discriminate against any industry. We have companies all over the board. We have, an IoT company. We have, a shaving company. We have, things all over the board. I would say, let's see. So we invest 200K into each company. And
200K into each company.
Yeah.
That's certainly something that's different, right? Because I don't know this for sure, so don't quote me on it, but I think that there's in some cases either sliding scales or different amounts, but 200K seems to be like a substantial amount of money for an early stage startup.
Yeah. So, a lot of our startups, they have some good form of traction. I would say a majority of our cohort is generating revenue and at least 10K MRR. I would say that's kind of like a loose benchmark.
Okay.
And have gone through some kind of like inflection point or pivot or whatever, and are approaching product market fit and growing rapidly. But it kind of varies between the teams, but that's kind of a general guideline.
Is Quake always the first check-in? Are you guys a follow-on?
No, we're not always the first. I mean, we have one company that went through Y Combinator before us.
Okay.
So it doesn't really matter. But we just do 200K notes, and we don't have to be the first money in. A lot of our companies actually right now are raising money, and a couple have pretty much almost closed another round in week 6. So
wow,
they're all they're kind of all in different stages.
Anthony, I know that you're not the type of guy to pump your ego and your own team, but when you think about Quake, why would a startup want to join Quake as opposed to some of the other funds in whether it's LA or SF or New York?
So from an before I got into Quake, I had an outside perspective of Quake. When they came here to LA, I was like, who in the world is Quake? They were just here and present, involved with USC, involved in all, like just out like there. And I was just really surprised by that and intrigued. I was like, dang. But I would say now that I'm inside, I can see why. I mean, our team is baller. Like everyone has so many connections. I think that's one of the biggest like value adds. And that's what the feedback I'm getting from our current cohort is that, the connections that we're able to make, they just send us lists of people and we know someone that knows someone, that, or we know them directly. And I think that's a big part of what they like, and it's accelerating their business. They've gotten some really good deals out of our connections. We have speakers that come in on a weekly basis, and those speakers are top notch, and I think they're very helpful. They do one-on-one mentoring hours after their talk, and I've gotten feedback from the cohort that they've gotten some really good connections from them. I mean, obviously the capital is great, but I think those things are really, really major for our companies, and that's the feedback I've gotten in week 6 about like what the biggest values are.
So I could imagine that with 15 startups per batch, you guys probably are seeing a lot more than the 15 that are applying there. So when you have a company, whether you're from California, whether you're from out of state, whether you're inner city, whatever background you come from, what are the qualities in that founding team that you look for that makes you want to bring them onto a cohort versus the ones that don't?
For me, what I look for in a team is just team dynamics. I mean, sometimes team dynamics is like not high on people's lists in terms of like just founders just knowing how they work together and knowing themselves personally. But I like to look at that. I like to look at the EQ and like how they work together, how they get along. I also like to look at like if that team has not just experience in that industry, but has a unique like insight that no one knows, like
a point
like
of
a
view
secret or like they can teach me something about it. I'm a very curious person, and I love to learn about new industries. I don't know everything about everything, but I do like to learn. And if they can teach me something about what they're doing, then that's a good indicator that like they're a dope team.
Which usually too, it's like so subtle, but it usually comes with an understanding or at least a focus on the depth of the problem, right? Because if they
Absolutely.
really know the problem, then they can help teach you why it's such a big problem or why their solution. But know your problem, guys. This is such a key thing to remember.
That matters to me the most, and I can't stress that enough. Like know the problem, be able to explain it concisely. Even twist the knife and make the investor feel more of the pain as much as you can, and then go to the solution. A lot of founders try to like create a problem from a solution, and that doesn't work. It doesn't work that way. And we've all, made that mistake but just don't do that.
Well, guys, Anthony has told you we've got a new cohort coming up to apply at Quake. Anthony, where can they find you? Where's the best place for someone that's listening to this podcast that thinks they want to check Quake out to go?
Just go hit our website, quakecapital.com. My email is anthony@quake.vc. Send me your decks, send me your, whatever. One thing about me is I answer every email. I try to meet with everybody. If they have a good need to meet with me, I'll try to do like 30-minute coffee with them or whatever. We're in Santa Monica, so, just reach out to me and I'll try to meet with you.
It was an honor having you today. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Really appreciate you,
man. This has been fun.
Cool.
I really focus on supporting founders to come to their own solutions as opposed to telling them what the solution is.